More than 50 years have passed since MASH first aired, and the show still lives in the memory the way certain things from your youth do. Not as entertainment exactly, but as a fixed point you keep orienting yourself around. 54 years is long enough for the cast of the 4077th to have lived entire second and third lives beyond that fictional Korean hillside. Long enough for the world to lose some of them, and for the rest to have changed in ways that would surprise the people they once were. What most viewers never fully tracked are the love stories that sustained some of them, the private battles fought far from any spotlight, the scandals that arrived quietly or loudly, and the deaths, each one a quiet subtraction from a world that still holds them young. So settle in. These were real people who gave something real to the screen, and what happened to them after deserves the same honesty the show always brought to the hardest things. Number 1. We have Alan Alda as Captain Benjamin Franklin Hawkeye Pierce. The conscience of the show, the man who used wit as armor and made moral fury look almost like charm, and whose grief in the finale became the emotional signature of the entire series. Alda was 36 when MASH premiered in September 1972, and he appeared in all 256 episodes across 11 seasons. He was not just the lead, he was the architecture the whole show was built around. In 2026, Alan Alda is 90 years old and he is still working. After MASH, he continued writing and directing, moved into a rich second chapter as a character actor, and earned Emmy nominations for his recurring role as Senator Arnold Vinnick on The West Wing from 2004 to 2006. He also founded the Alan Alda Center for Communicating Science at Stony Brook University and has hosted the podcast Clear and Vivid since 2018. He has been married to Arlene Weiss since March 1957, a marriage now approaching 70 years. They have 3 daughters. In 2018, Alda publicly disclosed a Parkinson's disease diagnosis he had carried for 3 years, revealing it himself before anyone else could, with the same directness and refusal to be reduced that defined Hawkeye Pierce across 11 seasons. Hawkeye Pierce was the most morally awake man in a morally bankrupt war, but Alan Alda became something rarer, a person who remained fully himself across 9 decades and counting. Number 2. We have McLean Stevenson as Lieutenant Colonel Henry Blake, the well-meaning commanding officer whose death in the episode Abyssinia. Henry was not announced to the cast until they filmed it, so the shock on their faces was real. Stevenson was 44 when MASH premiered and played Henry Blake through 3 seasons before asking to be released. He believed he could build something bigger on his own. He was wrong, and he knew it. The shows that followed, The McLean Stevenson Show, Hello Larry, Kondo, each failed within a season. He guest-hosted The Tonight Show 58 times and appeared in game shows for years, but the door never reopened. He later gave one of the most honest assessments any actor ever made of his own career. I made the mistake of believing that people were enamored of McLean Stevenson when the person they were enamored of was Henry Blake. What most viewers never registered was the specific texture of that exile. Those shows failed while MASH continued to run, season after season, without him. The writer Larry Gelbart said after his death that Stevenson had left too soon twice in one lifetime. McLean Stevenson died on February 15, 1996, at the age of 68, from a heart attack while recovering from bladder cancer surgery. Henry Blake was the man everyone wanted to believe was in charge, but McLean Stevenson left behind a more complicated truth that the right room, once abandoned, rarely lets you back in. 3. We have Wayne Rogers as Captain Trapper John McIntyre, Hawkeye's original partner, the other half of the show's first beating heart, whose departure alongside Stevenson left a gap the audience felt before they had words for it. Rogers was 39 when MASH premiered and played Trapper John through 3 seasons before leaving, frustrated by a contract he believed undervalued him. Unlike Stevenson, Rogers left with a different plan and executed it. He became a serious investment expert and financial analyst, appearing regularly on Fox Business Network and CNBC, building a second career that drew on the same intelligence and controlled impatience that had made Trapper interesting. He understood early that Hollywood's regard for you is a rented thing. What the audience never knew was that Rogers had been representing himself in contract negotiations. He had attended law school, understood what he was signing, and chose to stop signing it. His exit from MASH was not impulsive. It was calculated, and the calculation was correct. Wayne Rogers died on December 31st, 2015, at the age of 82 from pneumonia, on the last day of the year, having made considerably more of himself than the audience ever tracked. Trapper John was the rebel who couldn't be contained, but Wayne Rogers proved that knowing when to walk out is its own kind of intelligence. 4. We have Loretta Swit as Major Margaret Hot Lips Houlihan, a character who began as a target for ridicule and became, through 11 seasons of careful performance and harder-fought writing, one of the most fully realized portraits of a woman in uniform that American television had produced to that point. Sweet was 34 when MASH began and remained through all 256 episodes, one of only 2 cast members to do so. She won 2 Emmy Awards for the role. What she brought to Margaret's evolution from rigid antagonist to three-dimensional human being was not accidental. She fought for those changes in writers' rooms, season by season. In 2026, Loretta Swit is 88 years old. Her post-MASH career included theater, television films, and an increasingly prominent role as an animal rights activist, work she considers the most meaningful of her adult life. She married actor Dennis Houlihan in 1983. They divorced in 1995. What most viewers never knew was how actively Sweet resisted the earliest version of her own character. She pushed back against writing that reduced Margaret to a foil, argued for complexity in rooms where those arguments were not always welcome, and helped turn a caricature into someone worth caring about. Hot Lips. Houlihan started as a punchline, but Loretta Swit refused to leave her there. 5. We have Larry Linville as Major Frank Burns, the cowardly, self-righteous antagonist whose specific brand of moral hypocrisy made audiences hate him, with a feeling that was itself a testament to how completely Linville inhabited the role. Linville was 32 when MASH began and played Frank Burns through 5 seasons before choosing not to renew his contract. His reasoning was clear. He had taken the character as far as it could go, and he was a more serious actor than that would allow him to prove. He was right about the character. He was also right about the price. After MASH, casting directors saw Frank Burns when they looked at him. He worked consistently. Guest roles, Broadway productions. But television never gave him a second foothold. He was, as he once told an interviewer, a man whose royalty checks from MASH, after agents and ex-wives and taxes, covered his car insurance. He was married 5 times. What the audience watching Frank Burns never knew was that those who worked with him described someone entirely unlike him. Warm, genuinely curious, what Burghoff called a Renaissance man who understood Egyptian pyramid construction and once built and flew his own airplane. Alda gave the eulogy at his funeral. Larry Linville died on April 10, 2000, at the age of 60, from pneumonia following complications from cancer surgery. Frank Burns was a coward hiding behind rank, but Larry Linville was a serious actor who paid a serious price for playing him too well. 6. We have Gary Burghoff as Corporal Walter Radar O'Reilly, the clairvoyant company clerk from Iowa, whose innocence was the show's moral baseline, and whose farewell and goodbye radar left Hawkeye on the tarmac with a teddy bear. Burghoff was 29 when MASH premiered, and he held a distinction no one else shared. He carried his character directly from Robert Altman's 1970 film into the television series. 7. We have Harry Morgan as Colonel Sherman T. Potter, the replacement commanding officer who arrived in Season 4 and, through quiet authority and absolute command of restraint, gave the show the stability it needed to run another 7 years. Morgan was 60 when he joined MASH in 1975, already a veteran whose career stretched back to Broadway in the late 1930s and included major roles in The Oxbow Incident and High Noon. He brought to Potter a combination of military gravity and genuine warmth that differed in kind from Henry Blake's lovable chaos, and he won an Emmy Award for the role in 1980. His first marriage lasted 45 years until his wife Eileen's death in 1985. He married Barbara Bushman in 1986 and remained with her until his death. There is a fact most obituaries handled briefly. In 1996, Morgan was arrested and charged with spousal battery after police found his wife with a cut under her eye and a swollen foot. The charges were dropped after he completed a domestic violence counseling program. It is a fact that sits in direct tension with the humane authority he projected on screen, and it does not resolve cleanly. His former castmates nonetheless remembered him with obvious genuine warmth. Both things were real. Harry Morgan died on December the 7th, 2011, at the age of 96 from pneumonia, on Pearl Harbor Day, which several who knew him felt was somehow right for a man whose most beloved role was a veteran who had served in 2 wars. 8. We have Mike Farrell as Captain B.J. Honeycutt. The devoted family man whose longing for his wife and daughter back home gave the show a particular strain of ache that Hawkeye's detachment never could. Farrell was 36 when he joined MASH in Season 4. He remained through the final 7 seasons, including the finale that drew 106 million viewers, the most watched scripted television event in American history for decades. In 2026, Mike Farrell is 87 and still publicly active, not primarily as an entertainer, but as a sustained and serious voice on capital punishment. He has written, organized, and testified on death penalty cases for decades, and the celebrity the show gave him was, in his own telling, a tool he used to amplify work he would have done regardless. He was first married to actress Judy Farrell. They divorced after 20 years. In 1984, he married actress Shelley Fabares, and they have remained together for over 40 years. B.J. Honeycutt was the man who never stopped missing home, but Mike Farrell became someone who spent the years after the show trying to make the 9. We have David Ogden Stiers as Major Charles Emerson Winchester III, the Harvard-educated antagonist who replaced Frank Burns and turned out to be far too interesting a character to stay one. Stiers was 34 when he joined MASH in Season 6. After the show, he built a parallel career in voice acting that most of his television audience never connected to him. Cogsworth in Beauty and the Beast, roles in Pocahontas, The Hunchback of Notre Dame, and Lilo and Stitch. He was also a working orchestral conductor, serving as resident conductor of the Newport Symphony Orchestra and guest conducting more than 70 orchestras worldwide. He never married. World less brutal for people who had no one speaking for them. In 2009, he publicly came out as gay, explaining he had kept his sexuality private because so much of his income came from family-oriented programming, where the commercial risk felt real. His candor about the calculation involved was characteristic. Winchester would have approved of the clarity, if not the circumstances that made it necessary. David Ogden Stiers died on March 3, 2018, at the age of 75, from bladder cancer. He willed portions of his estate to arts organizations in his community, including the Newport Symphony. Major Winchester was an insufferable man who turned out to have a soul, but David Ogden Stiers proved that the distance between the person you perform and the person you are is sometimes much smaller than the audience assumes. 10. We have William Christopher as Father Francis Mulcahy, the unit chaplain whose faith was tested by every episode and who provided the show with its clearest moral witness, the quiet presence at the edge of every crisis, who saw everything and kept believing anyway. Christopher was 39 when MASH premiered and stayed through all 11 seasons and the After MASH spin-off that followed. After the show, he continued acting, repeatedly cast as priests and chaplains, which said everything about how completely he had inhabited Mulcahy and almost nothing about his actual range. He married Barbara in 1957, and they remained together until his death, nearly 60 years. They adopted 2 sons, John and Ned. His son Ned was born with autism, and Christopher spent decades as one of the country's earliest advocates for autism awareness, co-writing the 1988 book Mixed Blessings, with Barbara about their experience at a time when many families in similar circumstances did not speak of it at all. The audience watching Mulcahy administer quiet comfort never knew that the same patience was what Christopher practiced every day in his own home, with higher stakes. Alan Alda said after his death, "His kind strength, his grace and gentle humor weren't acted. They were Bill." William Christopher died on December 31, 2016, at the age of 84 from lung cancer, exactly 1 year to the day after his castmate Wayne Rogers, which felt somehow right for a man who had spent his career presiding over endings. 11. We have Jamie Farr as Corporal Maxwell Klinger, the Toledo-born soldier who spent 11 seasons in women's clothing attempting to convince Army psychiatrists he was unfit for duty, a joke that became, over time, something warmer than comedy usually allows. Farr was 38 when MASH premiered. Although Klinger began as a recurring bit part, Farr turned him into a fixture across all 11 seasons. He is one of only 2 actors to appear in every single episode. In 2026, Jamie Farr is 91 years old. He continued working in theater and television after MASH ended, toured in productions of The Odd Couple alongside William Christopher, and remained publicly connected to the show's legacy without apparent bitterness about where it placed him in the Hollywood hierarchy. He married Joy Richards in 1963, and they have been together for over 60 years. They have 2 children. It is, by every account, a genuinely and quietly happy life, built on constancy rather than spectacle, in a business that rarely rewards either. What many viewers never registered was how personally the Toledo connection ran. Farr is Lebanese-American, born in that city, and Klinger's pride in his Ohio origins was not merely a running joke. It was a real identity Farr brought from his own life, giving the character's absurdity a grounding that made it something other than costume. Corporal Klinger tried every scheme available to get out, but Jamie Farr stayed in the show, in the marriage, in the life, and that turned out to be its own kind of wisdom and its own kind of grace.